As of this moment, at least a third of the world's countries are involved in some form of conflict. The biggest victims are always civilians, and in war zones, women will often be specifically targeted. In Liberia, more than 40,000 women were victims of sexual violence during its first civil war. In Rwanda, at least 250,000 were raped and abused in just 1 year. The UN has designated rape as a weapon of war, but its widespread use continues to wreak havoc on communities. Well, TRT World Citizen, the philanthropic arm of the network, has launched a campaign to raise awareness of this issue. It's called Women of War. Take a look.
Sexual violence has been a consistent feature of the conflict.
Conflict-related violence took a particularly heavy toll on women and children.
As a lesser crime and a problem too difficult or too uncomfortable for societies to address. This is rape used as a weapon to achieve military or political goals.
Nothing could have prepared me for the extent and depth of the suffering I saw.
Everything I do is an act of survival for myself, for the group of people that I work with. It's time for us to make real these commitments about equality. You know your issues, you know your priorities, stand up, step out, and work for your own peace.
Well, let's go to our panel in Sarajevo. I'm joined by Selma Haji Halilovic. She's an activist and campaign manager of Fondatia Cure. And in Mogadishu, we have Dr. Mohammed. She's the Chief Executive Officer at the Dr. Hawa Abdi Foundation, which cares for thousands of Somalis. I thank you both for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Selma, let me begin with you. Tell me why, perhaps, over the generations and the decades, the specific impact of war on women hasn't been focused on. People have just sort of lumped everything together.
Thank you for such an easy question. I wish that there was an easy answer to that question. I wish that we are learning about war in schools and from books, but unfortunately we are not. And yet again, over and over, a generation after generation is suffering the same consequences of war. And usually it is the women who are the biggest victims, but also the strongest survivors. Unfortunately, even in the times of peace, women are not involved in a conflict solution finding, and even today, 20 years after the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we are still hearing in the mainstream media only about victims. Right. Me as an activist and as a woman who fights for the rights of women, I want to speak about the survivors, and I want to speak on their behalf right now.
Right. Dr. Mohammed, obviously different context in Somalia, but do you find similarities with what we're hearing from Selma, that perhaps the focus hasn't been on women and it should be?
I haven't heard much, but I will say there's a lot of similarity because the issues that facing a woman around the world is the same, especially in the war zones. So they are the victims and they are the weapon on the war. So the rape and everything happening is on the woman. So, and she's the front line, she's the one who's gonna suffer, she's the one who's gonna lose her son, her husband, or her brother. So it's not only the rape happening on her body and abuse, also the trauma that involved in the war.
Yeah, Selma, I remember when I visited the Balkans, especially when I spoke to those who were the widows of men who were killed in Srebrenica and so on. You had, usually the men in the family were killed, and it was up to the women who were now left with the task of not only rebuilding the family, but rebuilding the society. Have they received the help that they should be receiving?
Thank you so much for raising this question, because it is absolutely one of the questions that nobody really wants to talk about. And I'm so pleased to have among my friends women survivors of genocide who returned to their place of origin and who are trying to rebuild their societies. I am talking about the areas around Srebrenica where the biggest genocide after the Second World War took place, where today the majority of the returnees are actually women. We are talking about women-led households We are talking about women who are trying to struggle, not only the fact that they have become the mere bearers of their families, that they had to find strength to come back home and to continue with their lives, but also women who are today struggling to put their kids into school, to pay for education, to have the right to health insurance, to be educated, to have the right on cultural events in their local communities. Unfortunately, what you know about Bosnia and Herzegovina, allow me to say this, you know about the terrible things that happened in our war. And maybe you know a little bit about the beauties of Sarajevo and Mostar, one of the most famous cities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but you know very little about the little communities where people have bridged the differences, have decided that they want to continue to live together, and they're doing amazing things.
Deka Mohammed, let me ask you a question about the Horn of Africa and how, from my perspective as a journalist, women were used in terms of propaganda for different sides. So, for example, when it came to the Islamic courts and then Al-Shabaab, when we were covering the story, we heard of the subjugation of women under those groups that came with a very harsh version of Islam and their own kind of military domination. On the other hand, when there was an Ethiopian invasion, the Ethiopians and their backers were saying, we're going to be going there to liberate the women. And invariably, both sides end up killing civilians, killing women, and so forth. Tell me what this means as a woman in the Horn of Africa, as a woman in Somalia, that you're always used as an excuse for people's violence.
Oh, thank you for asking. It's a very important question. And the confusion that people have, as a Somali, we are a Muslim, we're very proud African Muslim, and all in Horn of Africa. African women are very strong women and the leader for their home. But no matter how hard they work and how they are part of educators, the breadwinners, the families, the leaders, they were not acknowledged, their role and their importance in the family. And in Somalia, before Islamic court or before Al-Shabaab came, Somali women were independent and hardworking and being proud to be African plus Muslim. And we're in our Islamic tradition and respect. But when the Islamic court came or Al-Shabaab came, everything fall apart. You know, it get worse. The rape was terrible. You know, the child marriage that happened in 1413 came out. Women couldn't go outside. We couldn't wear our normal, beautiful, colorful dresses like Africans. It's very complicated. But Ethiopian calling us, we gonna liberate, they are the one who brought more rape than during the Islamic court or Al-Shabaab. So it was very confusing. You came, you brought your soldiers, you want to, give us the freedom and liberty you're talking about, but the rape increased, the killing get more worse. We get burned from both sides, and none of them, not for the Islamists, not for the other groups of Ethiopian or the government, were not thinking the issues and respect and rule and rights of a woman. None of them were in the first place in agenda. So it's very sad to. We can take over as African women, as a Muslim woman. We should take our issues in our hand. We don't have to wait being discussed in a table and be in a menu. We need to be in a table and talk about our issues. I need to talk my rights and say, no, I wouldn't accept. I want to be, you cannot discuss about me and make some decision without me. So if you're doing decision without me, you're against me. So that's how I feel we should speak out.
So Salma, is that fundamentally what is most necessary? More women at the table to talk about their experiences and to be in leadership positions?
Absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I reject to be an object. I reject to be an object of war. I reject to be an object of political struggles, of political elite over my body and over my country. We have women from Bosnia and Herzegovina. We witnessed the fact that at the Dayton Peace Agreement, discussions for the Dayton Peace Agreement, women were not present. And we believe that the problems that we are facing in our lives today is the consequence of that. That women have not been present at the negotiation table, and our voices have not been heard. We are struggling with things that should be parts of our daily realities, like schools, like transportation, like health issues. Unfortunately, our male leaders did not find interesting or did not find important to discuss about those things at the Dayton Peace Agreement. We activists, we believe in two things. First of all, that justice means different things for different people. There is one justice for me, while there is another justice for a survivor of war violence. We have an initiative, regional initiative, that is called the Women's Court, that is trying to bring women together, women of different nationalities, different religious backgrounds, social, economic backgrounds, together, and we discuss the violence that we survived. And I'm emphasizing survival. We are the survivors. And for us, justice is something different than the justice that the others want to impose on us. That's one thing. As a citizen of the world, and as a women's rights activist, as a social justice activist, as somebody who's been at a very young age through a war, I have a responsibility for my daughter, also for the other generations. I have to speak up, not only in the name of my fellow sisters, survivors, activists, but also in the name of all women around the world. We need to be included in the peace negotiation processes. If women's voices are not heard, the new peace negotiation processes will not bring sustainable peace in the future. We will have something that might satisfy some political desires, but the society in general will still suffer. And we need to be included. And this is my pledge. Really, women have to take part fully, 100% active in all peace negotiation process taking place right now.
Strong point, and unfortunately I'm going to have to leave it at that because I have to move on. But the two of you are already two of my favorite guests on the Newsmakers. So when we talk about the Balkans again, or we talk about Somalia, or anything interrelated, I'd love to have you both back on the program. Salma Haji Halilovic and Deka Mohammed, thank you very much for joining us. All the best.
Thank you.